very warm welcome to everyone who's joined us this evening. It's evening in India, slightly later in the evening in Singapore for the speaker, and all other friends who have joined from different parts of the world. Just to set the context, we call this a regal webinar. So today we have chosen the topic as storytelling. That is the topic that we've chosen, and the topic that we got from the speaker, esteemed speaker, is tactical storytelling. And now, again, going back to setting the context, let's take a minute to reflect on who has been the best storyteller for us in our lives. So when I thought of this morning, I remembered my grandmother. Typically, I think grandmothers would have been the first storytellers for us. Then, as I had some time, thanks to the lockdown, I reflected on what makes her my favorite storyteller. It was not the quality of storytelling that we would scientifically analyze today. I thought, it was a relationship also, apart from the story itself. A lot of stories were from mythology, of course. Also, when was the last time you heard a great story? These are some of the thoughts I was reflecting this morning. And more important, as a coach, what is the story that I'm telling myself today, as of now? 1 out of 2, when we speak today, they say, so far, so good, not bad. Perhaps a lot of people are affected badly, but then what is this choice that we are making in terms of the story that we are telling? Now, jumping to our story, we are Regal Unlimited is a firm that's into leadership development through coaching, coach training. We also do leaders as workshops, leaders as coaches. And we are also unique by the fact that we bring healing and counseling under the same roof. So what makes us unique? What's that one element of the story that's different? We bring all this under one roof. And we are all qualified professionals, certified, trained, and with experience. And that ROI of enchantment is our tagline. So ROI is I'm a banker, former banker. So ROI is integral to everything that we do. And enchantment is something beyond mere numbers. The purpose of these webinars are to support leaders in maximizing their potential. The previous 2 editions were on ICF team coaching, ICF being International Coaching Federation. And the last one, the last Tuesday of June, we did a session on emotional intelligence in the realm of resilience in the challenging times. So we are going to continue with this every last Tuesday, 7 p.m., 8 p.m. India time. Now, it's an honor, privilege, and a great joy to introduce the speaker for this evening. It's Professor Neil. He is the managing director at Plot Wolf. I know him more as my professor at INSEAD. And some of the other members of this group, there are quite a few who have joined us because we all attended, we have had the privilege of attending to Neil's sessions. He's a PhD in psychology. He's also done his postdoc in neuroscience. Again, psychology and neuroscience is very integral to what we do as coaches, and also a lot for storytellers and leaders. He has taught thousands of people from startups to Navy SEALs. And, he's a very popular teacher, storyteller, professor. That's why we invited him for this topic. No wonder that he has won a bunch of awards for his teaching, mentoring, and guiding. And he claims, he reminds us, he's very direct. He's a master storyteller. He has really shaken us during our journey at INSEAD as part of our leadership program. And that's his profile for you to look up after the webinar. Once again, thanks, Neil, for accepting this invite and joining us this evening. Over to you for a great evening session with the group. Thank you.
When I was in high school, I would often get home around 6 p.m. I would walk in. My father was home already. And the entrance to our living room is where I came in. So I came to our house into the living area. And my father had this big reclining chair, and he always sat there reading his newspaper. When I would walk in in the evening, he'd be sitting there reading his newspaper. And as I walked in, he kept reading his newspaper. So I would just sort of tiptoe past. There was no, hey, how are you doing? How was your day? He just sat there reading his newspaper. In 2008, I was teaching in Fontainebleau statistics. I used to be a statistics professor. I was teaching statistics to MBA students, and there I met my wife. My wife is Indian, Rajitha Vinakota. Eventually, after a whole bunch of pressure, right? She's Indian. I'm a white dude. She's getting a whole bunch of pressure. When are you going to get married? When are you going to get married? When are you going to get married? Eventually, in 2004, finally, I made parents and her happy, and we got married. Then, what's the next question? When are you going to have kids? When are we going to get some grandchildren? When are the grandchildren coming? Now, my in-laws are too polite to say anything like that to me. They're very, very polite people. But my wife heard it a lot. I know that my wife hears it, and then I hear it through her. So that's happening. But 2014, when we can legitimately start thinking about having children, I think, I'm not sure I want to have children. Okay, I have a serious worry about having children. And my serious worry is that if I have children, I worry that I won't be a very good father. I worry that I will be cold. And I feel that it will be irresponsible for me after I get married to have a kid and then not have any kind of relationship with the kid to be cold to the kid. And I feel that was a very legitimate worry that I had. Now, in 2016, we got pregnant. My daughter, Quinn Vinakota Bearden, was born on January 6th, 2017. And one thing that I like, one way that I got me to being a professor at INSEAD is I've always really liked books. And I want Quinn to really like books. I don't want to have to shout at her to study. I want her just to really desire books. Books have helped me a lot. Without books, I wouldn't be here. Without a love of books, I wouldn't be here. So I started doing, I'm sure what many of you all did, I started reading to her. As soon as she came out, I'm immediately reading books to her. And the books that I tend to select are books that rhyme. Why? Because I really like poetry. And I like rhyming words. When I was young, I used to like rap music. I like rhyming words. It resonates with me. So I started reading books to her, and it was great because she loved it. She would get all excited. She had her favorite books, like Pow Pow Fish. She really loved Pow Pow Fish. Pow Pow Fish is about this grumpy little fish called Pow Pow Fish. And the hook that she always liked is, I'm a pow pow fish with a pow pow face for spreading dreary wearies all over the place. So I'll blub, blub, blub. And then we'll have a verse. Along comes a jellyfish. He floats through the ocean. His tentacles all trailing in a gentle locomotion. Hey, Mr. Fish, with your daily scaly scowl. I wish you wouldn't greet us with a grimace and a growl. My daughter would just get very, very excited. But most of the books just rhymes cat with hat and dog with frog. And it didn't sound very musical to me. So I was reading books to her, but I didn't feel that she was getting all that she should get from those books. So 1 year ago, a little over 1 year ago, it was May of 2019, I decided I want a book that I enjoy reading to her. I'm sick of cat and hat and dog and frog and all this childish stuff. Even though it's a children's book, I want her to get something out of it. So I wrote this book right here. This is called Sam the Clam. Now, you can't find this on Amazon because this is the only copy in the world. Sam the Clam is a story about this guy right here, Sam the Clam, who is maybe he's a clam, maybe he's a UFO. He gets discovered by a guy working at NASA, and then he finds himself, Sam the Clam finds himself working for the CIA during the Cold War, getting sent on missions to Cuba and to Eastern Europe. And interspersed throughout the narrative of Sam the Clam going through the Cold War, his experiences in the Cold War, is we get some narrative. We find out where Sam the Clam is on the map. And then we get these images, and the images have Sam the Clam, and they show you what was happening to him. But more critically, Sam the Clam was a poet. Okay, so Sam the Clam was a Cold War spy, but he was also a poet. This is the first poem in the book. So, Joe found me in a river on his family vacation, no ordinary day, September. He was a spaceman, an astronaut at NASA who never went to the moon. He was part of advanced research on mind-bending spoons, telekinesis on non-human species. He'd written a thesis on methods for rhesus, tested on fungus, extended to mollusk, molecular hummus. Now I walk amongst us. I miss Joe. And the book takes us with Sam the Clam. Next scene, we find he's in Cuba. In Cuba, he has this existential moment where he learned, this is the moment where he learns that the Cold War is going on, that the world could end at any time. And so here he's sitting on the wall, looking at the ocean. It says, I just wanted to watch the ocean, sat on the wall, looked at boats and said to myself, who am I? I am a clam that stands in time. I am a clam that stands upright. Grains of sand like plans unwind. I rhyme besides a man deny. Clap hands with a clown whose face is pie. Arms, empty races, bases fried. And it goes through. Now, I didn't write this book for a 2.5-year-old girl. She's 3.5 now, but I wrote it a year ago. I didn't write this book for a 2.5-year-old child. Although when I read it to her, and when I read it to her, she has the right response. And what's the right response? To nod her head, like some Tupac is playing. That's what I want her to do. And she does it because she feels the rhythm. And that's what I want to happen. But I didn't write it for a 2.5-year-old girl. Someday, she's going to go to university. She's going to go to university, and she's going to be unpacking her boxes. And she's going to find this book in there that's been sitting on a shelf. And she's going to flip through it again. And she's going to pick up her phone or send me a hologram or whatever people are doing 15 years from now. And she's going to say, Dad, I found that weirdo book that you sent me. What were you thinking writing a book about a clam during the Cold War with all this weird poetry in it that a baby couldn't understand? And we'll have a wonderful conversation. And she will realize that I didn't write it for a 2.5-year-old girl. I wrote it for her then, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. And we will have an absolutely beautiful conversation. Now, storytelling is like that. What I'm going to try to get you to understand, I'm very simple. I'm a very, very simple person. I'm going to have one major point. And I'll just tell you up front what my major point is. The objective of storytelling is not to talk, is not to tell some cute little anecdote. The objective of storytelling is above all to improve the memorability of what you say. You want people to remember what you say. You want people to remember you. Storytelling is simply a means to a particular ends. And I'm going to walk you through my model of communication. And you can use this in life. And by the way, life, okay, a subset of life is business. So I'm going to talk about life. And don't say, oh, professor, what about business? Because business is just a subset of life. Because when you're dealing with people in business, you're dealing with people. And people in business or outside of business, they respond the same way to communication once you understand it. Here's my model of communication. Remember this. When you communicate, there are 2 necessary conditions that you need to satisfy. They're necessary, but they're not sufficient, you're going to see. Not for the ambitious people. And I presume if you took time to be here right now, you're ambitious people. So what are the 2 necessary conditions? The first, you must get your audience's attention when you communicate. Now that's more difficult than you probably imagine right now. I know, not because I have any special skills, but because I spend every day talking to hundreds of people. I'm a teacher and I just get constant feedback. And I see, because I'm paying attention, that it's very difficult to get people's attention. Now, why do you need to get people's attention? It's obvious, but let's understand it. I'm going to give you a metaphor. Attention is a gate. And it goes like this. Because remember, attention is a necessary condition. Attention is a gate. Not only is it a gate, but it's a very heavy gate. And gravity's always tugging at it. And the idea of a gate is when a gate is closed, stuff doesn't get through. Now, what do we want to get through? our message, our communication, our story. Let's just call it our message. We want our message to get through. Now, when we have people's attention, attention is high, the gate is up. When attention is low, when we're being boring, for instance, or for whatever reason, when they're not paying attention, our message doesn't go through. And then it's game over. So here's a tip that results from that is one thing that you never want to happen is you want to get their attention. And I hope I have your attention, because if not, if you're not listening to me, then it's game over. So one thing that I encourage you to do anytime you're telling a story or giving a message, it comes from a writer who sold a whole bunch of books, a fellow called Elmore Leonard. He wrote a whole bunch of books. A lot of them got turned into Hollywood movies. One of them is Get Shorty. Maybe some of you saw that movie. And people often asked him, what are you doing? What's your secret? Why are you selling so many books? And he says, it's very simple. I leave out all the parts that people skip. Now, when someone is telling you a story, when someone is communicating to you, when do you start getting distracted? When does your gate start closing? When they're telling you stuff that in principle, if you had to skip ahead 30 seconds, 15 seconds, like on a podcast button, right? You can feel that. Someone's talking, but if you could skip ahead, right? Just imagine that we can develop something where in reality you can do that. You can do that on recordings, but imagine you could do that in real life, right? We got some sci-fi movie where when someone's communicating, you can skip ahead 15 seconds. Anytime you're saying something that in principle, people would skip ahead, what's that mean? The gate is closing. And when the gate is closing, it's catastrophic because your message doesn't get through. Okay, so the first condition you need to satisfy is that. Leave out all the parts that people skip. Do everything you can to keep the gate up. Because if the gate closes, nothing gets through. That's the first necessary condition. The second is that you need, and this is all obvious, the second is that you need to be understood. When you're communicating, when you're telling a story, when you're delivering any message, pitching to a VC, applying for a job, trying to make a sale to a client, just talking to a buddy at dinner, when you're communicating something, you need to be understood. What does it mean to be understood? Very simple. I have some picture in my mind, metaphorically, and when I'm communicating to you, I'm trying to get you to form the same representation, the same image in your mind. And when we have the same pictures in mind, we understand each other. If I have one picture in my mind and as I communicate, you start forming a different picture, the greater the degree of disparity between those two, the more misunderstanding we have. Or conversely, the greater the overlap between the two, the greater our understanding with one another. Now, let me summarize. There are two necessary conditions for communication, for sending a message effectively. You need to get people's attention. The gate needs to be up. The gate is closed. You're not communicating anything. They're not listening. That's obvious. If the gate is up, you also need to get them to understand you. Because if you communicate and they misunderstand you, they form a different image, then what's the point? Because your whole point is to get your message through that gate and in there reliably. But the reason why I'm here today is because that's not good enough. I didn't write that book for my 2.5-year-old daughter. I wrote it for her 20 years from now. And I want you to think about your messages like that in a more modest way. I'll show you. Which is the real goal that you should have. And storytelling is only a means. I just want to emphasize that. Storytelling is a very effective means for achieving the right objective. What's the right objective? I'm going to give you two of them. That in principle, well, first of all, in fact, you want people to remember what you say. You want people to remember your message. I'm going to give you an arbitrary distance into the future, 1 month from now. If you give a presentation, a pitch, you talk to a client, you do anything, and a month later, right, this thing that you prepared for, no one remembers it, you failed. I'm sorry, you failed. Now, why might you fail? One reason is you didn't have their attention. The gate was closed while you were talking to them. But suppose you got through the gate. Suppose your message got through the gate and they actually listened to you. Well, if they don't remember it a month later, there just wasn't something, it wasn't sticky enough. It didn't embed itself. There's this Leonardo DiCaprio movie, Inception, where they go and they implant memories in people's minds. Probably, 50% of you have seen it at least. Now, That's what you want to do. And you did not accept if, they were polite, they paid attention to you, but a month later, they don't remember it. So that is a real ambition that you should have, right? There's no point, this is me, maybe it's my ego, but there's no point in communicating to people if they don't remember what you say. Now, if that's not true in all circumstances, that's a very good operating assumption that's going to put you on the right path. Next, the real reason. Not only do I want people to remember what I say, if I want to be incredibly ambitious with my communication, but in principle, if not in fact, but at least in principle, I want them to be able to explain to other people what I said. So if I tell you a story, I want you more or less, not verbatim, but I want you more or less to be able to, first of all, remember that story a month later and to be able to retell it to someone. And that can hold for any message. If you remember my message and you can tell it to someone else a month later, I message very, very effectively. Let's review. When do I not message effectively? When the gate closes, when I don't get your attention because I say a bunch of stuff that you don't care about, that you're not really listening to, I encourage you to shut the gate. Now, here's the thing about the gate. Let's go back to the gate because we can't overestimate the importance of the gate. This is why you need to trim out all the blah, blah, blah that we tune out. Because when the gate closes, there's a kind of momentum to it. And it's much easier to keep the gate up than it is to open it back up once it's closed. Because if you start talking to people and you put in too much stuff that they want to skip over, the gate closes and then they get distracted. They check out for a little while. So the economics of attention is it's much more costly for you to repurchase that attention. Listen, pay attention. Have you ever thought about that before? Attention is a very expensive, precious resource. So it's much more difficult to get people's attention back than it is to keep it. So you want to keep the gate up. So we want to keep the gate up. I'm summarizing. We want to keep the gate up so the message gets through. We want them to understand us. And for the ambitious amongst you, you want people to remember what you say a month later and be able to repeat it to someone else. Okay, that's the basic model. Now, storytelling, you can start using storytelling as a method. You can use it tactically to achieve your objectives. Now, what do I mean by storytelling? I don't have a grand definition that I'll give you, but storytelling, the way I teach it, the way I explain it to people, is deliberately making what you say, listen, this isn't what you were expecting, visual. So when you're communicating as a storyteller, you are trying to give people quite literally a mental movie. You quite literally want them to get you want to get them to see what you're saying. Now, let's break that down. I did a PhD in psychology. You know that, you heard that. Now, what you don't know is the detail. What was I studying? Okay, I didn't have people laying on a couch, tell me about your dream. That's not what I was doing. I was doing cognitive science. And what I was interested in for a big part of that was the way memory works. And it's turned out to be incredibly useful for me professionally in life to understand how memory works. So that's what I was studying. So how does memory work? Well, here's a fact that you can use to see how this system works and to start to get a sense of what you need to do. Okay, what's the system? The gate, understanding, memorability, repeatability. This is our sort of chain of goals that we have. Here's one fact about memory. Information that is encoded visually, if you see an image in your mind, when that's encoded, it's much more enduring. That's just a fancy way of saying it lasts longer than information that is encoded in propositional form. What's a propositional form? A sentence, a bullet point. So if I can give you a visual image, all things equal, whatever that means, but all things equal, you're more likely to remember it if you see something when I'm telling it to you than if you just hear me just assert a sentence. Okay, so let's go back to where we're talking about storytelling. My definition of storytelling, it's deliberately trying to take what you're saying and give people a mental movie. Now, we can also talk if we have more time, but we need to be modest right now just to make sure that something sticks. And we could worry about story structure, setup, development, resolution, beats, turning points. There's a bunch of technical stuff that we can worry about. We don't need to worry about that so much, because the most important thing, if you remember the goal, is to take what you say and make it visual. Now, I walked into my house. I walked in the living area. My father's sitting there in his chair at 5:30 in the evening when I come in every day, reading his newspaper. He didn't say, hey, how are you? The newspaper didn't come down. Now, what I want you to see is, I want you at some level in your brain to see some man just behind the newspaper. And I want you to see his son walking in, and that man not saying hello, not saying anything. That's what I need you to see. And then later, I might want you to imagine me, rapping to my daughter, or reading Pow Pow Fish to my daughter, and to see that experience. And why do I want you to do that? Why did I start with that? Because I know if I come in and I do something unusual, I give you some poetry. Well, probably most of these calls that you're on, you don't have some American guy shouting poetry at you. Okay, so I'm going to do something distinct. I'm going to get the gate up. I'm going to give you a distinct image of that man behind the newspaper. And then I can start to, if I want to spend more time on it, thread it all together. How did it thread together? Well, got the man behind the newspaper. I get married. Deliberately mentioned to you that my wife is Indian. Why do I do that? Because I want you to like me, see that there's some relationship that we have to one another. It's all deliberate, right? It's all got to be deliberate. I could have made it a little bit more deliberate. Radha and Prasad, I could have mentioned their names. Oh, okay, I'm also Telugu, and I could have done all that stuff. But what I want you to see is man behind newspaper, pressure to get married, okay, married, pressure to have kids. Neil's reluctant to have kids because he keeps thinking about, he doesn't want to be the man behind the newspaper. Then finally he has a kid. He doesn't want to be the man behind the newspaper, so he writes a book. But why did he write the book? Because he wants to have a beautiful conversation with his daughter 20 years from now. Okay, so the book is nothing more than an opportunity to have a conversation. And you can view your own stories like that. Why do you tell stories? Because if you tell them well, you get the gate up, much better than some boring blah, blah, blah. You jump right in, you give people a story, you make it visual. Visual is more likely to be remembered. And why do you want people to remember your stories? Why do you want people to talk about it? Well, because any communication you have, or not any, I'll be more modest, a lot of the communication that you have, it's not the end of the road, it's just the beginning of a relationship. So I want to tell you something now, and then, someday, like 5 years from now, when we can all travel again, right? Whenever the world returns to normal, Prasanta, I'll run into you in the Mumbai airport. We'll cross paths. And Prasanta, when I see you there, I want you to say, how is Quinn doing? Have you written any more books? Oh yeah, by the way, I've written this. This is what I've done. And so when I see you, Prasanta, 5 years from now, what I'm doing right now in telling you a story is I'm starting to shape that conversation that we're going to have in the future. Because I'll tell you, I'll be honest with you. If I ever see you, and some of you I definitely hope to see again someday. Some of you I know. I hope I see you again someday. And I don't want to talk about how are things, how's Singapore. You know what I want you to ask me about? Okay, the thing that all fathers want to be asked about. How's Quinn doing? Have you written anything else? Okay, so I'm hoping that I give you something right now that is going to shape that conversation. And that's the way I want you to tactically think about storytelling. Why am I telling a story? Okay, pardon the redundancy. But when you teach, you realize that redundancy is very, very important for retention. So forgive me if you've got it already. I tell you a story, I make it visual. I give you the man behind the newspaper. I give you a little bit of poetry. Probably gonna not do poetry in most professional settings, but that's just an example here. I do that, why? Because it gets the gate up. It's gonna draw you in. Okay, I wasn't expecting that. That's interesting. I see it playing out. If I came and I was giving you some 30 minutes of PowerPoint right now, you'd be tuning out. You'd be checking WhatsApp. You're not checking WhatsApp. You're listening to me. Okay, so I need the gate to be up. I need you to get what I'm saying. But what I'm really doing is all of this is just tactical. Okay, just telling you a poem. I'm not telling you a poem to tell you a poem. That's a tactic to get you to tune in, to keep the gate up, so that Prasanta, when I see you in the Mumbai airport, you ask me about Quinn and you ask me about books and how that's going. Because I'll have that conversation, brother, with you all day. If you want to talk about how are things, how's the weather in Singapore, some blah, blah, blah. I don't like small talk. I want you to ask me about Quinn and Sam the Clam. Where can I buy Sam the Clam? Can you read Sam the Clam in my kid's school? Can my kid get a copy of Sam the Clam? He likes rap. And I want to have that conversation. Because brother, I'll have that conversation with you all day. And so stories just become methods to do that. Now, let me tell you, after a lot of experience, just even in the past 3 months, I've taught storytelling in this format to about 600 people. And there's a lot that you can learn from doing that. I've learned a lot. When you tell stories, if you want to increase the chances that Prasanta asks you the right questions in the Mumbai airport 5 years from now, after the pandemic, when we can all travel freely again, if you want him to ask you the right questions, if you want to steer that conversation in the right way, then the story that you tell, it works best if it is a true story about you. Okay, this is just this is an empirical fact, and I'm emphasizing this point deliberately, because I'm not talking about some, Indian parable or just some LinkedIn parable that you write about a guy and his blind father, something like that. That's cute. That kind of thing gets likes on LinkedIn and so on. But if you want to guide the conversation with your client, with whoever you're talking to, what unambiguously works the best is a true story about you, when possible, that has some emotional content that connects with your audience, that it relates to them in some way. Okay, I also want to be a good father. I want to be a whatever, and people can relate to it. So when I talk about storytelling, what I mean is not just some story that you make up. Okay, those are also stories, right? Because they're stories. But what really works the best, definitely, unambiguously, is a true story about you that is relevant. If you have a true story about you that is relevant to your talk with your client, if it's relevant, then your client will listen. When does your client think that you're just saying a bunch of BS? Well, when you make up some story that's not relevant. Okay, so if we get to questions in a little bit, right? If I ever stop and take a breath and allow you to speak, what I don't want someone to come at me, because I'm answering it right now, and say, how do I use this in business? Well, the way you use it in business is you find those experiences that are relevant to the context, and you make it relevant to your audience, and you make it visual, and you keep it short. Why? Because you want to keep the gate up. And you just need to keep in mind, why am I telling a story? I'm telling a story because I want him to remember what I say and to talk about it. Maybe with me later on, like Prasanta and I at the airport, or maybe, if I'm talking to a VC, I go to some social event, I'm talking to a VC. Well, when he gets back to the office next week, I want him to remember my idea that he talked to me, and he has colleagues. So he's going to talk to other people who are on the investment committee. It would be fantastic, without me having to even send him my deck, if he can recount my basic idea that I illustrated, hopefully, maybe through a story as an example. If he can remember it a week later and explain it to his colleagues, and they go, oh, that's interesting. We should invite her in for a pitch. Okay, young female founder pitching to him. If they say, that's interesting, let's bring her in, right? And she gets an email from them. She doesn't even have to send her deck. They're emailing her because they're talking about it. She was an incredibly effective communicator. What's a disaster? Did you meet anyone interesting when you went to that pitch event last week? No, I don't remember much, man. And that's true, because think about, what percentage of what you hear do you remember? Most of it is boring and forgettable. But if you can make it relevant to the situation and visual, that's the way you incept. Summary. Okay, summary. You got to keep the gate up. What's the gate? Attention. That's the most important thing. How do you do that? Leave out all the parts that people skip. Make it visual. Just get to it. Get to it. Okay, let me start over. Hello, everyone. I appreciate you all inviting me here tonight. I'm Neil. I'm a professor at INSEAD. I began my career teaching statistics, and then I transitioned into decision making over time, and now my primary teaching activity is storytelling. I believe that storytelling is very important, and today I want to talk to you about storytelling. Skip. No, I didn't start that way. What did I do? Walked in, my father's sitting there with a newspaper. No halo, just cut to it, get to it. Why? Because the most important thing is the gate. You need to keep the gate up. You need to keep the gate up, then you need to get people to understand you, and then you want them to remember what you say so that they can talk about it. Okay, that's enough redundancy, but that's what I mean by tactical storytelling. What is tactical storytelling? I know at each point, listen to this. I know at each point why I am doing what I am doing, and I'm always doing it for a purpose. And almost never,
Okay.
almost never is the purpose to tell a story. Almost never is the purpose to tell a story. A story is just a means to something else, to get the gate up, to communicate in a way so that it's easy for people to understand what I'm talking about. Often examples are very good for that. You make it visual. People see what your technology does. They see that it's valuable. If there are any entrepreneurs on here, if you're raising money, here's a very simple way you can get people to understand what you're doing. This is why I work with a lot of founders. Same method with everyone. Show us, I'll just use user as the customer example. Show us what the life of your user looks like right now. Okay. Rajitha Vinakota right now wakes up and tell me what Rajitha's life is like before your technology, your service, and then show me Rajitha's like, walk me through her day in the critical way that relates to what you do after. And then if you want me to understand that what you're doing is important, first of all, understand what you're doing by showing me how users use it, by seeing her life before and seeing what she's doing differently after, then I see, okay, this is what it's all about. And I will also understand, hopefully, I pray for you, that there's a big market opportunity, that the total addressable market is big when you show me that before and after of Rajitha. And I say, okay, the delta between those two worlds is pretty big. That means what? That means people should be willing to pay for this. And if I can imagine that there are a whole bunch of people like Rajitha, I see that there's a big total addressable market. And that's without you throwing a bunch of stuff at me yet. All the numbers and all that comes later. But if you can win me over by showing me that delta before, showing me. That's the thing. Remember I say for me, storytelling is making what you say visual. Then that's good. But I don't want you just to understand me right now. I want you to remember next week when you're back at the office, okay, you're back on Sand Hill Road. I want you to be able to remember what that you talked to me. And if you can explain it to your colleagues to the investment committee, that's wonderful. Then you start pitching for me. Now, how do I get you to start pitching for me? How do I get you to go to the board and say, these are the people we should get for coaching. These are people we should do for this, whatever. Well, you make it easy for them to talk about you. So what you want to do with tactile storytelling is, okay, let me shape my message and not tell some long blah, 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 but let me tell something that gets the gate up, that makes them understand it, and that is in principle easy for them to repeat. So what does that mean? And I violated this one for sure in this. Whenever you can take what you're saying and make it short, you make it much easier for people to repeat. So if you can make your message visual and short, always with the goal in mind that someone else can remember it and repeat it, then you've satisfied very important tactical objectives. Because what's the strategic objective? Because you can't use tactical clearly without also introducing the strategic. What's the strategic goal for the founder? Well, to get the investment, say. from the VC. Now let's work backwards. And I'm just going to wrap up by working backwards. Let me just see where I am on the clock. Okay. Let's work backwards. Startup founder is an example, but you can apply it to sales. You can apply it to anything. What's the strategic objective with the VC? Well, it's to get the VC to write a check. To get the VC to write a check, in one world, what do I need to happen? Well, I need the investment committee to meet and to say yes to do it. Okay, well, what do I need for that to happen? Well, I need them to be able to understand what I do, to be able to talk about it, discuss it. But if I'm going to get to that point at all, even close to the strategic goal, then whenever I'm pitching my idea, I need to make sure that I satisfy those two critical goals, the necessary conditions, that I communicate it in an interesting way, so I keep the gate up, and that they understand it. And I need to line everything I do. So how do you get people's attention? Because that's the most important thing, right? I could have called this session attention, because really it's the most important thing. Storytelling is just a mechanism. You need to give them reasons to listen all the time, either by making what you're saying visual or linking it to them. Okay? Again, why did I mention my wife is Indian? Why would I say Radha and Prasad, my mother-in-law, Amama and Tata, right? I can say all kind of stuff. When you hear some white guy saying that stuff, you're going to notice it and you're going to lean in and the gate is going to go up. So when you communicate, don't just start talking. This is what people do too much. They just start talking. Never just start talking. Always talk and do everything you do deliberately to keep the gate up, to make it understandable, to make it memorable, to make it repeatable. The end. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you want to take any questions, Neil, or I know it's late evening for you, or we'll just reflect on this?
No, I'm okay. I have 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to take questions. Let me just be up front. Completely happy to take questions. One part of my approach is if I don't know the answer, I'm just going to tell you that I don't know the answer. Okay, so I'm not going to act like most professors and just tell you some blah, blah, blah. If I don't know, I'm just going to tell you.
Neil, may I give it a go? This is Nanda, C5.
Cool, let's do it.
Hey, Neil, my question is, you spoke about storytelling, create visual, and you have been narrating your own stories. Now, how do I translate it to, let's say, a written message? Does it work there as well? If yes, how? Thanks.
Yep, good. Okay. Nanda, I like you, man. I saw you taking notes. I saw how engaged you were. I hope I can give you an answer. I really appreciate your participation. Let's do it this way. Let's break it down to, remember, there's the method, but then there are the objectives, these tactical objectives: getting attention, understanding, being memorable, being repeatable, discussable, whatever we want to call it. Now, in spoken real-time communication, those are the objectives. Those are the same objectives in written communication. Okay, so for instance, if you ever send me a message, Prasanta, if you send me a message, I'll just tell you, here's what you can do. Because frankly, I get a bunch of messages. Okay, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I get a whole bunch of messages. If you contact me, I'm just gonna make it easier for you. You don't have to say, dear professor, I hope you and your family are doing well. I hope everything's okay in these tough times. Because I get, some days on a busy day, I would get 200 messages. Some days I get 12, some days I get 200. And if there's a big old paragraph of stuff that, I get it. No, I know you're thinking that stuff. I know you're being polite. But if that was the beginning of a podcast, right, what would I do? I would skip ahead. Okay, and that's not being rude. A big problem is we think, oh, well, if I don't follow these normal conventions, I'm somehow being rude and it's going to backfire. I don't think that's true. I think what you need to have is you need to have the right objectives. And what is the critical, what's the first necessary condition? I need to get your attention. and that doesn't get my attention. Something that everyone is saying doesn't get my attention. What gets my attention? Boom, get to something. Professor, I saw that okay, this person has done some homework, something's going on. Now, we need to, again, keep in mind the objectives. So I need to get your attention, need to make sure that you understand what I want, and what is critical. What is critical always is that you keep it short. Now, if you can give it to me in such a way that later on, I remember what the point of your contact was, say if it's that kind of message, good, that's probably all we need. Because what you need is you need to get my gate up, you need to get me to respond. Because I'm supposing that when you're talking about written messages, you're talking about electronic communication. Is that what we're talking about? Or are you talking about, oh, yep. Nanda, I just want to make sure I'm answering the right question.
Predominantly electronic communication. Most of what we do is either email or WhatsApp, for example, today. Right? So
yep.
Here, how do we, that was the question actually.
Yep, cool, good. Give me something to want to talk about. So I'm going to introduce something a little bit. Sorry, I just got distracted for a second because Preet just has a very good image. I need to get the same person who did that for him to give me that kind of image. I like that. I don't know if you see it. It's super cool. So it's great, brother. Think about this. When you communicate, I'm gonna reorient my answer a little bit. Okay, listen. Because I'm gonna tell you something, and a common reaction to what I say right now is, oh, but that's risky. Because people think if I leave out all the normal stuff and I just do something that's unusual, that's a bit risky. The problem with most communication, and I'll be bold, I'll just say because there are enough people here where statistically I feel comfortable that this must be true. The problem with a lot of your communication is that it's way too conventional. It's not, I'll be more specific, it's not distinct. That someone reads it and it just sounds like everything else. That's very risky. Because if it sounds like everything else, you know what happens? The gate doesn't raise any higher. And critically, I don't remember it because it all sounded the same. Okay, listen to this. Bed, rest, awake, sleep, hippopotamus, tired, dream, doze, slumber, snore, nap, peace, yawn, drowsy. How many of you remember from that word list, hippopotamus? Did you notice that? Yep. In psychology, that's called the von Ristorf effect. Okay, the problem is if I just give you bed, rest, awake, sleep, tired, dream, doze, slumber, snore, nap, peace, yawn, drowsy, all of those words are related, right? They're all related to sleep. They're all the same conceptually. But if I pop hippopotamus in that list and I say that list to 1,000 people, if they're paying attention, are going to write down hippopotamus. Maybe only 43% will write down drowsy, but 100% will write down hippopotamus because it's distinct. So in your messaging, if you want it to be remembered, then it needs to be distinct. Okay, so if you can somehow make it visual, so Nanda, it's not so much about storytelling, but it really, the critical thing is keeping the gate up by making it engaging in some way. How do you do that? Leave out all the parts that people skip and making it distinct. I'm going to give you a metaphor to help you remember it. I went on a date with a girl. We went to go have breakfast. I was living in Tucson. This is before I moved to Singapore. We had some brunch on a Sunday, and I really wanted her to like me. I wasn't sure how the breakfast went. I had another meeting that I needed to go to. So at the end, I paid, I bought her some breakfast. I said goodbye. She was going to hang out and do some work at the place, get another cup of coffee and do some work. And just right next to my plate, a little bit behind my glass of milk, I left my sunglasses. And then later that afternoon, I got the message that I wanted. She said, it was nice having breakfast with you, by the way, you left your sunglasses. Can we meet and I'll give you your sunglasses back? Like, okay, boom. Okay. Why? Why did I leave my sunglasses? Because I wanted to make sure we had another meeting. I didn't want that to be the last one. So then we met at a Starbucks and we had some coffee, and then we had a third meeting. And partially, I don't know how much of it was due to it, but it certainly wasn't hurt by me leaving my sunglasses. So Nanda, a good way to think about being distinct is you got to leave some sunglasses. Okay, how do I know you were here? You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. Thanks very much, Neil. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep. So hippopotamus is leaving sunglasses, is being distinct.
Prasanta here, Neil.
Yep.
Have you overcome your dislike or fear of eating raw onions? And why I'm asking so is fear is a good thing, because you feared that you may not be a good father. What turned out to be, Neil is a much better father to Quinn than Neil's father was as a father to Neil. So I remember that, you disliked having sushi, then you started liking sushi. You dislike having, I don't know, I mean, once I commented on your this thing long back that please try raw onions with fried fish. So is fear a good thing? Fear something, because some people say don't fear, fear is bad. But at times the fear works to your, benefit at times.
Absolutely. So let me make it more, I'm going to narrow it down, my answer to this context. So fear is good. And here's a fear here are two fears that you should have. Really, you should be, as a communicator, you should be terrified of two things. One, losing your audience's attention. If you talk, right, probably many of you spend a lot of time on Zoom. If you're talking to a screen full of people on Zoom and you're not noticing what they're doing, and you don't notice that they're all checked out, you're not scared enough. Because what you should be looking at is, are they with me? Are they with me? Why? Because if they're not with you, the gate is closed. So the first thing that you should be fearful of when you're communicating is that you're boring. And you should be paranoid about it. You should just be so scared. If I'm boring, I'm a loser. That's horrible. Be terrified, Prasanta, because then it will make you more attentive to what's going on. Second, Nanda, you should be incredibly paranoid that when you talk, oh God, what if they don't remember me? What if they don't remember me or what I said? And you should let that fear drive you to be more deliberate. Okay, let me deliberately cut out all the parts that people skip. Let me not just start talking. Let me talk deliberately with clear tactical goals so that I get their attention and they remember what I say. And you should be driven by fear strongly. Why? Because my observation of a lot of people just start talking. They saw other people talk like this and the guy before them talk like that, and they all talk, and sorry, it's often boring and we don't forget it. So Prasanta, you don't need to worry about it, man. You're very distinct, but the rest of you, worry about not having your audience's attention and worry about what you say being forgettable. That you should treat that as a catastrophic disaster, worse than raw onions.
Neil,
yeah.
This is Siddharth here. While talking about fears, one of the things that comes to my mind and I'm always paranoid about is not getting a true story to connect with my audience. Because one of the things that you very beautifully said is a true story about you that connects with the person or with the audience that you're talking about. Have you come across a situation where you do not have a story that is true enough, but you have to talk about? Because I understand when you say framed stories are risky business.
Yep. That's a beautiful question. I think you can make it easier for yourself by trying to get clarity on the objective. So what constitutes a fitting story in this circumstance? And I think we can make that too specific, where we say, well, I don't have a story about, growing up poor in Detroit, Michigan, working as a milk delivery boy. Oh, I don't have a story, right? That's too specific. But maybe the point of the story is not that. Maybe you should give yourself a different kind of objective, which might be, for instance, this is a very important one that a lot of people struggle with, which is I'm going to tell you a story. And the point of my story is to demonstrate to you a certain vulnerability. Okay, I'm going to show you that I'm vulnerable. Why? Because I need you to trust me. I don't need you to know exactly this thing, but I need you to know that when you talk to this guy right here, he's going to be open with you. And I'm not just some phony sales guy here right now talking to you. So what you might be able to, and Siddharth, you probably just need about 5 or 6 stories that work with respect to these kind of broad objectives of being trustworthy, vulnerable, kind, disciplined, whatever that you can use. And you just stretch and you re-specify the objective, and you will always have a story.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah.
Nikhil, you wanted to come in, and Ragini, you want to ask that question to Neil?
Yes, Neil, the question that I wanted to ask was, you might be remembered for being distinct and, you may have had a great story, but still it may not meet your objectives.
Including funding.
Like you've made a page, it's really good, it's visual, but you know what? It doesn't cut ice with me. I may remember you for your story, but may not fund you.
Yep. Okay, good. Thank you. Put this in your notebook, everyone. Okay, I alluded to this, but now I'm going to be more specific. I joke, and the Ellipsi people don't get triggered by this, but I sometimes joke to people that really most of business, a lot of business school, what you're taught in business school, at least as I understand it, comes down to 2 key things that you need to remember. This isn't everything, but this is the way I boil down business school. Simple. You need to specify your objectives, and then you need to align your actions with achieving those objectives. That's the first thing. If you just remember that, life becomes very, very simple. Second, going back to the question, is that life is a portfolio allocation problem. And what I mean by that is we need to decide, where do we put risk? Do I put everything in venture capital? Do I put everything in public equities? Do I put everything in bonds? Do I keep cash? Do I buy gold? Life is like that. So if you say, the question, as I understood it, is, maybe you do that, but maybe it doesn't work. Right. Okay. You invest in startups and sometimes they fold. Right? You buy a stock, sometimes it goes down. What you need to ask yourself is, how should I take risk? And it seems to me, this is my observation, that a lot of people, they worry, if I tell a story, it might not work out. What do I need to do? Look, almost nothing is guaranteed to work out. What you need to do is to decide, how do I allocate my risk? And a risk that I think people underestimate, is the risk of not being distinct, of being forgotten. So what I would do if I were pitching is I would make sure that the idea is good. Okay, I just did an online pitch class for some folks, and that's the first point I made. Don't think that you're going to come to some class, learn how to tell some story, and if your idea is garbage, you can go, tell some BS and get funding. It doesn't work that way. At least you shouldn't assume the world works that way. That at least 90% of the success is going to depend on the quality of whatever idea is being communicated. But a whole bunch of people have good ideas, and if yours doesn't sound distinct, if it's not memorable, then it might not get funded. So this is not to say that if you're distinct and you have hippopotamus in your pitch, that everything's going to work out. All I'm trying to say is there is a massive risk of being forgettable, of being boring, of being forgotten. That's the risk that I think I sense almost everyone worries about. And a large part of it, this is my own just psychoanalysis, is a lot of people get that allocation wrong because they're worried about that, you know, what if it doesn't work? And they go back to, oh, what I need to do is I need to make sure they understand me. And they over-explain their idea with some 68-page PowerPoint that people stop listening to. The gate closed on slide 12. Get very clear on what your objectives are, and then align everything you do with those objectives. And you must take risk. And your greatest risk, I think, that you don't appreciate, most people, just speaking statistically to you, is the risk of not being distinct, of being forgotten. There's no...
Neil, just one question, a straightforward question. So initially, I'm a trainer, so I face this one. Initially, in the opening, say 5 or 10 minutes, I'm able to capture the attention of the audience. But going forward, after some time, no, people start losing this attention. How do you maintain this attention till the end?
You answered your own question, okay? If there's a point beyond which you lose their attention, end it there. Okay, Elmore Leonard, leave out all the parts that people skip. And here's, like, I talked to you for too long today. I built in tremendous redundancy that wasn't needed. That 45 minutes that I spoke to you, it could have been 15. Now, if in those settings, but I kept it, I did it at 45 because I didn't lose most of your attention. I could do that, it felt, given just the signals I was getting from you. But, you know, if Nanda hadn't been taking notes, and if he started drinking an iced tea, smoking a cigarette, and I saw him turning the dial on his radio, then I would have shortened it. But I was getting the right feedback from the people I could see. So if you're getting the wrong feedback, just like a startup, you pivot. Okay, I'm gonna wind this thing down. A big mistake. Okay, people say, Neil, can you come? Okay, how long is the session? We'd like to do 90 minutes. I won't do 90 minutes. Yeah, but we normally do 90 minutes. No, I'll do it for 40. Okay, because I know I can keep people's attention for 40. If you want me to talk for 90 minutes, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Okay, because I have a massive ego. I'm not gonna go talk to people, and at minute 80, everyone's sending WhatsApp messages, and I'm just sitting here talking to myself like a fool. So another thing that you can do is reframe. Okay, but people are used to 20 minutes. I should talk for 20 minutes. Well, you can get people's attention for 8. So maybe you just take what you say and you just make your point in 8, and then you just never run the risk of the gate closing, because what you're describing to me, as I understand the question, is the gate closes. What do I do when the gate closes? Well, just don't allow the gate to close. Either be more interesting or shorten it. Okay, and here's a theorem. This works a little bit better with graphics, but I'll just explain it to you. Is suppose that, this is my model, that imagine that we have some, first of all, each of you, and you can feel this, that when you're listening to a speaker, sometimes you're very engaged and sometimes you're not so engaged. And you can feel it when someone's saying something that you like, you can kind of feel this meter going up, and someone's saying some blah, blah, blah that in principle you would skip, the meter goes down. Just feel that when you listen to me, when you listen to anyone. We all have this meter. Now here's the model. We have this scale, this meter, and suppose that above some threshold, we're in the green zone. Green zone is good. When the meter is high above threshold, that's good. That means people are attending to what we're saying. As the meter gets below some threshold, just to make it simple, we go into the red. People are getting disengaged. They're getting bored. Now we can imagine that we plot across time as the speaker is speaking. We can see when the meter is in the green and when it's in the red. Okay, so we're going to get some curves. Sometimes the curves are up here and they're green. Sometimes they're down here and they're red. And imagine we just take the integrals of those. We just get the area. And imagine the following model, that whenever the time in the red starts to overwhelm the time in the green, that's when people just close the gate, they check out, they pull out WhatsApp. Okay, so if you build up a lot of time in the green and it's boring for a little bit, people will cut you some slack, they'll keep listening. But if you just keep keeping them in the red, at some point, they just completely check out. Now, that's the model I need you to understand. Now, here's the theorem. We're just going to make an assumption. You'll see. The assumption is that all things equal, the longer you've been talking, it's more difficult to have people in the red than in the green, all things equal, right? Because audience is fatigue. You're getting tired right now. You need to go to the toilet. You need to check email. Stuff is going on. It's much harder right now for you to pay attention than it was 35 minutes ago, on average. Okay, so people check out when the time in the red overwhelms the time in the green. That's the basic decision model. Assumption, it's easier to keep people in the green earlier on than later on, or conversely, people are more likely to be in the red than the green later on. Okay, if what you're trying to do is you're trying to avoid the catastrophic risk of the gate closing, what should you do? All things equal, if you can make your message, if you can deliver your point in a shorter amount of time rather than a longer time, you should. Why? Because it's catastrophic. When the gate closes, it's game over. So if you can find a way to say what you want to say in 15 minutes rather than 25, say it in 15. And if the organizer, whatever for the meeting says, well, but you're supposed to speak for 30, say, well, we can just, the remainder of time can be for questions. But what you shouldn't do is just fall back to convention and bore people, allow the gate to close because there's some arbitrary 30 minutes that you're supposed to speak. Compress, 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 subject to the constraint that you're making your points effectively so that it's understood and memorably. No one will be upset if you say in 15 minutes what you have to say rather than 25. I promise you, no one will be upset.
Thanks for that great perspective, and thanks for being so open with that point. Well taken. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I had a question.
Okay.
I wanted to understand how you came up with this name called Plot Wolf.
Cool, thank you. I came up with it because one thing I do a lot of is I do storytelling coaching. People come to me and they want to learn how to improve their ability to tell stories. I do that. I like that. I think I'm very good at doing that. And then some people kept coming to me and they say, I don't know what the story is for my business. I want you to figure out. I don't want you to teach me how to fish. I want you to give me a fish. What's our story? And so I realized what some people need is they needed someone to come in and fix their story. I'm working with a tech company right now, and they have these big deals, but they go talk to the Fortune 500 companies, and they don't know how to communicate quickly how what they're doing is very important. So they want someone to they don't want me to tell them how to tell stories. They want me to tell them what story they need to tell those people. So if you ever saw the movie Pulp Fiction, some of you have seen Pulp Fiction, Quentin Tarantino movie, there's a character in the movie called the Wolf. And the wolf is the dude that you call, if you're in trouble, if you're just in some impossible trouble that you can't get out of, you call the wolf. He was played by Harvey Keitel. So the wolf comes into these tricky situations and he fixes things. So if you can't tell your startup story, or your company just can't figure out how to make the sales, you don't know how to tell your leadership story to get people to appreciate you call Plot Wolf. That's what I do.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Nikhil.
Yeah. Neil, if I am a very unconvincing storyteller, what should I do?
First, great question, man. And a lot of people have the same problem. The most important thing you need to do is to deliberately practice. And technology is wonderful. Okay, because in my phone right now, I have one of the best storytelling professors you can get. The video function on this. So if you think you're not great, if you think that you talk to people and they're in principle skipping ahead 15 seconds because you include too much detail, or you're just finding that you're losing audiences, what you can do, and brother, I'll tell you, it's painful. People don't like it because I have everyone I work with do it. It's painful. You film yourself and then you watch it. You're like, oh man, that sound like that. That doesn't sound very smart. First time you realize you're going bald is when you're watching one of these videos. All kind of stuff happens. And then you do a second take and a third take and a fourth take, and you keep dialing it in and you just keep practicing. And when you watch yourself, you will probably pick up on at least 50% of what you need to fix just by watching yourself. The problem is just showing up to a meeting, trying to do it, but then not having the documentation you need, the video evidence, to go back and analyze it. And you can do that by yourself. That's the first start. And I wouldn't try to do anything else. Look, I tell you, because some people, look, let me just tell you, let me preempt any messages on LinkedIn, whatever. Don't email me. Don't send me any message. Okay, I hope you haven't already done it. Don't send me any message saying, Professor, do you recommend any books? I'm not going to tell you any books. Okay? Until you've recorded about 100 videos and watched them, don't go read books. Because after you record a whole bunch of videos of you telling stories, then when you go read those how-to books on storytelling, it will make absolute sense to you. If you go place some Amazon order and wait on the books to come, oh, I'll read those books and then I'll do it, that's resistance. You'll never get better. And when you read the books, it won't really click. The books will click after you've done this exercise a whole bunch of times. That's really the absolute best thing you can do. And then you go from there, but that's the first step.
Sure, thank you.
Yep, I mean it. So, hey, Nico, a question for you, and this is a good question for anyone. Are you going to do it? Okay, because
Yes.
there's this insidious force, okay, because a lot of people nod their head. Most people don't end up doing it, okay? Those of you who don't know, you're still good people, I'm sure, but I'm just being honest with you. It's because there's this insidious force in you, resistance. And resistance is going to say, I can do it later. I'll do it next week. I'm a bit busy this week. Oh, COVID, I'm doing a lot of Zoom calls. I can't do it. Oh, my kid's got to. That's resistance telling you that, because you know how long it takes to record a 3-minute story? 3 minutes. Okay? And if you don't have 3 minutes in your lifetime, then storytelling is not your problem. You need to go take a time management class, right? Everyone has 3 minutes.
Devi? Devi had a
Yeah,
question.
hi. Hi, Neil. First of all, it was a wonderful session. I think the metaphor, the gate will always remain. It is going to guide us for the next conversations. Yeah. What I wanted to ask you is that first I was thinking, storytelling is how well you are able to articulate a story, and right at the beginning or at the end for the participants to carry home the message. When I heard your story and the way you kind of narrated, I am thinking that it's not just a story. I think you have to interweave your, throughout the conversation, some bit of story or maybe a longer story that get interwoven into the whole conversation, so that you are flowing with the story and with the content of the conversation. Yeah. So it's not that easy that we thought, you remember 20 stories and you just start up. That's not going to help. I think we need to even learn more in detail, saying that what's the art of interweaving that story into the whole conversation. I think that's coming to me. I think anything you want to highlight on that?
I think that's a good way of putting it. And it all comes down, and I'm just going to repeat myself now, just keeping your eye on the objective. And what's critical, so I see Prasad in your name, so that's just my father-in-law, so I'm zooming in on that. It's, when we're communicating, don't think I just tell a story right now, but the whole time I'm talking to you, I'm communicating with you. So what do I need to do? It's this complicated dance that can't be taught. I'm communicating with you. I see you're liking what I'm saying. You're leaning in. I see that when I mention this part, you lean in more and you like it. I pivot to this other part. I see that you're getting a little bit distracted when I do it. And you just need to keep dancing with your partner. And sometimes that'll mean going back to the story or bringing in another story or leaving out story entirely. If he seems like a numbers guy who just wants to get to the end efficiently, some German guy, whatever. And you just gotta keep dancing. So that's, Debbie, that's the thing. You just gotta keep dancing with your partner and you'll figure out how to do it. But first, you gotta at least practice the basic skill by doing this.
Yeah.
And then you start weaving it in like that.
Thank you. Yeah, agree. Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
how much time? How many more questions you want to take, Neil? There are a few more comments and questions. How many questions are too many questions? That's one comment.
Well, I don't know, because I might respond to one in 10 seconds, or I might end up ranting at you for 10 minutes. So let's just take one more question.
Yeah, one last question. I saw two raised hands. Anyone can come in. Vaishali, I saw you had a comment.
Yeah, can you hear me? Hi, Subhash.
Yes.
Hi, Neil.
Yeah.
Right. So, Neil, my question is, how many stories are actually too many stories? Because you have people who, start presenting and they'll start off with one anecdote and then they continue to another. So in efforts of explaining it further, sometimes the entire conversation or the pitch just becomes a series of stories, right? So is there any, a funda or a logic towards structuring that particular pitch is something that I wanted to check.
Yeah, so if we think about, let's just narrow, because everything depends, but if we zoom in on a pitch to a VC, pitch to a potential client, pitch generally, so business school professors make up numbers. I'm going to do that right now, but it'll point you in the right direction, which is probably it needs to be 90% numbers and substance and only 10% story, right? Because when you got some person who just keeps telling you a bunch of stories, it can start to sound a bit thin, a bit manipulative, not credible. So I would do 90-10. And the story, remember, the story is just a means. So the story is just there to make all of this other stuff more memorable in some way. The story is leaving the sunglasses, but the bulk of it should be on substance. Now, the hard thing is, how do I allocate it? Because remember, everything's a portfolio allocation problem, and we can map it here. Do I just dump the story at the beginning? Do I dump it at the end? Do I intersperse it throughout what I'm doing? Well, it all depends on my ability to do so, the circumstances. But that mix, however I do it, probably shouldn't be 10%. As soon as you find that your pitch is 50% story, I'm not writing a check because it sounds too thin. Sounds like you're trying to hide behind story. If you give me just 100% numbers, I might not be able to remember it. I might get overwhelmed because the story also gives a bit of kind of breathing room when I'm listening to something. So 90-10, if you're pitching to a VC, what I tell people is every fourth sentence should contain a number. Okay, so you need to have a lot of substance in there, but you need to find some way to leave your sunglasses, and you have to decide how to allocate that, but no more than 10% just to make up a nonsense number.
Right, thank you.
Yep. Okay, folks, I wake up at 4:45 in the morning. So
yeah, thank you very much, Neil. Thank you once again for taking time out and spending with us.
Thanks, Neil.
God bless.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Neil. Bye.
Remember, fight resistance, huh?
Got that.
Neil, I'm sitting on the floor and enjoying it.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Subhash.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you, Neil. Stay safe. Thank you for the invite. It was a nice session. Thank you, boss. Thank you.
Thank you.
Neil, and thank you, boss.
Thanks, Subhash.
Thanks to all the participants.
Thank you, Subhash and Neil. Thank you for the session.
Subhash, and thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Subhash, so much.
Excellent session. Excellent session.
Thanks, Subhash. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Subhash. Thanks.